Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today as we shine a spotlight on the new Indiana science standards. I am Angela Fitzgerald. I am the Director of Programs for the STEM Connection, and I have been involved in STEM education in Indiana for about 20 years, first as a middle school math and science teacher, and then now more in the informal learning space with the STEM connection. So I have seen a number of iterations of science standards over the past 20 years. And I'm joined today by Vera Vanderkooy, who is the executive director of the STEM Connection, and who's also spent her entire career in education. So today we are excited to share a little bit more about what we've learned and kind of help everyone start to unpack these new science standards here in Indiana. If you are not familiar with the STEM Connection, we are a nonprofit organization that works to educate and empower children and adults in the principles of science, technology, engineering, and math through hands-on learning experiences. And we have this short video that's going to share a little bit more about the different programs we have and kind of our approach to helping youth.
When a child has the opportunity to be in the experience, to be the finder and the doer and the creator, to learn at their speed and in the best way for them, that's when real meaning happens, when mastery occurs. How can we create those experiences that break down barriers for all children and allow us to come alongside that child young, and then as they move into the next stages of life? That is really where the power is. We are at the STEM Connection, located at Moore Road Farm here in Indianapolis. We run programming that excites young people about the future. We try to make STEM come alive for them.
One thing that I love about STEM Connection the most is that it answers the question that I get asked all the time. When are we going to use this in real life? I'm a math teacher, and so that's a question that I get constantly from my kids. At the STEM Connection, you find out where you can use these things in real life, and you find out that there's so many different opportunities.
You know, if we can have a child feel like, I'm a scientist, I'm a technician, I'm an engineer, I'm a mathematician, even very young, it's going to stay with them. Yeah. We have 6 programming opportunities. We have field trips that run year-round, day camps. In the summer, we run weeks of camp.
One of the favorite things that the kids have is to go down to the creek. They love creek stomping and finding all these bugs and things that are down there. You never really look for those. You're more just like playing in the water. But then we would be flipping over rocks and like collecting bugs. And there's like so many different things down there.
We have a program called STEM Quick Wins. This is a video resource that has a short activity sheet with it. We also have STEM family kits, and they allow us to connect with children that may not have the resources to do those quick STEM activities at home. It has a literature connection, and it has materials for more than just one child to do the program. And in addition, we have a program called STEM Future Leaders. This is for our middle school, high school students, and they get a chance to delve more into the leadership space, connect with STEM professionals, find ways to make a difference, and really connect to the next stage of where they're going.
I'm Jeremiah, and he's James. I want to be an artist or an animator. I want to be a scientist / engineer.
My boys are 11 and a half because apparently the half counts. They've done STEM camps, and now that they are in middle school, they're part of the STEM Future Leader program. So it's just been several great opportunities to connect with science, technology, engineering, and math over the course of the majority of their life, actually. They're super responsive to students' needs. And I think what's great about that is now I can see my boys explaining concepts to younger kids. And if you can explain to someone else, that means you really have internalized that knowledge. The STEM connection is open to all families. And when I say diversity, I don't mean just racially. I mean, there's focus on underrepresented groups, such as girls getting into STEM, kids of all abilities, students with different sensory needs, cognitive abilities, coming to a place like this where they get to see all different kinds of people and learning how to work together. I think that's going to benefit them greatly in the future.
I want to trust young people that they know sometimes more than we do about how to learn and how to look at something differently. They're the future, right? They're the innovators now. They're the ones that are going to solve the big problems. So if we're just planting those seeds and setting up moments for them, that's really where I see the power.
So when we think about what we are, we can see it through the video, which Angela just introduced and excites us about the possibility with STEM. And then we can see it in those programs she mentioned in the video. These are the opportunities that the STEM Connection has. And we really want to think about how do those opportunities look. So we love those pictures because pictures tell the story. And I think a lot of times, even in any type of learning experience, if you can capture pictures, it really shows that doing what you've set up for those children that you're working with. So those pictures are something we always are trying to capture and help us think about that learning experience and how it's kind of coming to life. And we also are thinking about multiple layers of what's important to a young person. How can we connect with them? How can we help them move forward in their confidence and in their knowledge so they're set up for the next stage? At the STEM Connection, we think about STEM. We think about how it's defined. We think about the practices we want to have young people involved with. And we think about the future. We think about where do we want them to go next and where will they have those opportunities and what can we do in our programming to set them up. And in addition, we think about those standards because those standards just are the underpinnings of what's important for a child to be learning. So we know what the school day is going to be looking like, and we want our programming to mirror that school day. So those standards are crossing over into what we're seeing. We want that STEM to be a active type of STEM. We want it to really kind of jump off the page more than just static. So we're really looking for observations and investigations and experimentation in science. We want them to be using tools when it comes to technology, inventing and solving problems. We want them delving into the process of an engineer. So that engineering design process, putting that forward to solve problems. And then we want them thinking about math as that language, a way to share information. It is facts and figures, but it's also a way we can communicate. So we really try to pull those out as we set up our programming. In addition, when we're thinking about these pieces, the practices that we want to have young people involved with is what we know is so important for a child to learn. So when I'm thinking about those standards, I'm thinking about those practices that are coming out. And I want to be considering how can I make them come alive and how might I blend multiple practices? So not just an isolated piece, but really noticing what's happening. A lot of times in a STEM experience, and when I'm hitting certain standards, I'm doing multiple practices with the young people I'm working with. So just really trying to be aware of those as we're helping young people understand they're doing all of this when they're in a STEM experience. And then we're thinking in that forward thought of what does the future look like? What is it that employers will be looking for when our young people are at that next stage? What is it that we know is important in the workplace today? Those employability skills standards are something that are really the reason why teachers do what they do. They really want to set children up for the future. The knowledge is so important and such an underpinning for what happens at school, but all these other pieces
are happening in a learning experience. If it's out of school, in school, just a very non-formal setting, these things are still happening. And I can look at these and I can think about just in the last week how these have been important in our workplace, what we've been talking about, what's important as we go into the new year, because we're going into a new year right now. What's on our mind? Angela, is there one that you connect with right now in the work you're doing?
I think the one that's kind of jumping out to me is I'm thinking about, kind of the new year situation, just the lifelong learning piece. And that, as much as we know, and even if we are, experts in something, there's always more to learn, or there's a new tool we might be able to use to help us, do our work even better. And that we can learn things in so many different ways. You could read a book about something, or you could watch a show or a video, or you could go someplace new and just make some observations. And we can always be learning from other people, our peers, or those that might be older or younger than us. There's just so many different opportunities to have new experiences and learn more about so much that I think that one right now is just something that I'm connecting with. And what are some of the new things that I want to explore and learn about this year, and how can I set myself up to do that? Vera, is there something that kind of sticks out to you as we're starting here?
I really like that lifelong learning as well. And I think it kind of goes to the webinar we're having today, because we've all worked with standards in some capacity. More than likely, if you're on this webinar with us joining, you've seen standards shared with you in multiple ways. You've probably seen multiple renditions of them. You understand the importance of them. But, when something new comes out, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it, concerned by it, unsure of it. Those are really normal feelings. But I think if we can have that lifelong learning kind of mindset around it, that it's still these standards we know are so important, they're just kind of shifted now. They look a little different. They're really trying to think about those best practices and kind of cross things in a way that's going to help children. And once we kind of delve in and let ourselves not feel overwhelmed, I think they're going to feel a lot more comfortable. But it's hard to try new things. But we can, and we can do hard things. And that lifelong learning isn't always easy. But I really like, Angela, that you kind of brought that one up. And I think too, making sure that we have the space to feel confident in trying out new things, where we're not so bogged down by something else, I think is really important going in to the next period of time. So thank you. And I'm going to let you kind of jump in and kind of share about our next piece of the puzzle when it comes to the new state standards here in Indiana.
Yeah, so here we go. So what we know is that, it's a cyclical thing. There are new standards coming out kind of every year, and each kind of subject area gets new standards written here in Indiana every, I think, 6 to 7 years is kind of the cycle of things. And in this past year just happened to be a science standards year. So what we know about the standards is that they were kind of released last summer, the summer of 2022, for schools and teachers and organizations to kind of start looking at them and getting familiar with them and making the transition to those new standards kind of during this 22-23 school year, knowing that they're not going to show up and reformat our standardized tests until the 23-24 school year. So specifically those of you kind of in that 4th and 6th grade where those standardized tests in science fall, you have a little bit more time to kind of make that transition. I think this is important because the science standards do look very different, kind of the way that they're even just kind of presented and formatted compared to how they were before. And then we always know when there's kind of a new iteration of the standards that sometimes some content or some ideas may shift from one place to another or have some different language around them. So it gives us just a chance to kind of take our time and see where we are, where we were and where we're going, and kind of make those transitions happen. And kind of this was put out by the Department of Education to kind of help us understand how and why the standards kind of look the way that they do now. So, just more of a reflection of how science and engineering is practiced and experienced, making those connections and thinking about how we can apply the content is some of the motivation behind kind of some of the verbiage changes that we see, trying to set things up even more logically from kindergarten through grade 12. So we'll see that idea, that scaffolding, where something might be presented kind of initially in one grade, but we'll see it repeated. Again, that's not new, but maybe just trying to realign a few things to make that have a more logical sequence to it. And then really incorporating this 3D approach to the standards or to learning, right? So this three-dimensional approach that incorporates what we see here, those practices, core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. So as we move on, this next graphic here, this is a little bit further explanation of that three-dimensional approach. And this is a image that comes from the next generation science standards, because really the Indiana science standards now are quite the reflection of the next generation science standards. They look very similar in formatting and the way that the information is kind of shared. And so you'll see now kind of all of these parts very apparent kind of for each individual standard. So you have those, the disciplinary core ideas, or in other words, kind of the content that we have. We have those practices or those behaviors that scientists and engineers engage in to help them learn content. And then those cross-cutting concepts or those themes that link different content together or link kind of the content to the world around us. So we'll see those. And we're going to talk about each of these three dimensions in a little bit more detail now. So the first part that we're going to talk about are these practices. And good news is this is not new for Indiana. It's simply a new name. So what we used to call the science and engineering process standards have simply been renamed to the science and engineering practices. So if you think about kind of what the standards looked like before, if you had your grade level standards, there was some narrative. It shared those science and engineering practices kind of all together, and then it went into the content. So now we're just looking at these processes and thinking about, these are those activities that are going to help students gain an understanding of the content. So by, asking questions and defining problems or using models or constructing explanations and designing solutions, they're going to be working with that content and thinking about it and thinking about how to apply it. And then they're going to hopefully be set up for a greater understanding of that content. So the practices are kind of, the process, what is being done to help students understand. And again, it's not new. And what's lovely about this part is that these ideas here are the same kindergarten through 8th grade. So regardless of what grade level you're teaching, regardless of what setting you're in, if you're providing opportunities for students to do these things, you're addressing part of the standards. So that's a great thing. The next part here are these cross-cutting concepts, or in other words, kind of these big themes that we are going to find that kind of run throughout all of the different content areas or the different domains that we have with our standards and the content. So some big ideas here. So I'm just going to take an example here. If we think about patterns, right, is this big theme. Well, if I'm thinking about kind of the life science domain, I may be thinking about patterns in terms of the needs of living things or life cycles, like those stages of life, right? So patterns, a big idea in life science. I can also think about that in terms of maybe my physical science, where maybe we're thinking about states of matter and where those are found and what happens when we mix states of matter or warm them up or cool them down. There are certain things, certain kind of predictable things that might happen when we do that. Therefore, you have some patterns right there in physical science. If I'm thinking earth space science, we might be thinking about weather patterns or moon phases, right? Some of those things that we can observe over time or in different ways to help us see kind of how things make sense and can be somewhat predictable. For thinking about engineering and technology, we can think about, the design of things. Are there certain shapes or structures that we see to help make things stable, or what sorts of materials are we using? So just there as an example, these are those big themes that we're going to see all throughout lots of different content areas, right? When we kind of start to break down those different content domains. And then finally, we have those core idea domains. This is the content, right? And then here in Indiana, our standards are broken down into 4 domains. And this has stayed the same. We have our physical science, our earth and space science, our life science, and then the engineering, technology, and application of science. That one in red there used to simply be called engineering, and now it just has kind of a more broad approach to that, because it's really about some of those practices that help us apply the science and think about the connections of those different things. So this part kind of stays the same, but maybe some of the specific ideas underneath each one might be a little bit different. So what we've done next is essentially taken a look at these standards themselves and the content that's there in each of the domains, and really kind of pulled out the biggest ideas that we're going to see across the way. And we'll kind of, as we go through, we'll flip through. We have kindergarten through 2nd grade here. We'll have 3rd through 5th and 6th through 8th. And they're kind of color coded for you to just to kind of take a look at. That orange is your physical science, the green is your life science, blue is earth and space, and then red is that engineering, technology, and application. So really trying to kind of pull out the biggest ideas. So you can think about, if you're a classroom teacher, kind of what grade level or grade levels that you're working with, and you can take a quick moment to kind of look through and see, what sorts of content have I been expected to teach previously, were my standards kind of before, and are there any differences that we're noticing now? If you're working in the out of school time world, you may take a look here. If you know the age level of students that you work with, that you serve, you can start to see the sorts of activities you may want to do with that age group. So you're making those connections to the school day, because that's great when we can make those connections in the out of school time to what those kids are learning in school. You can also see, as we continue to kind of flip through here, that at certain grade levels, there may be a focus a little bit more on a certain domain. So in this case, as I looked at 3rd grade, I see a lot of green standards here. So I'm going to see that, 3rd grade looks pretty heavy in the life science, but as you move on to 4th and 5th, that physical science and the earth space science seem to have more of the emphasis there. So you can kind of start to see how things might kind of ebb and flow, and kind of the focus from one grade to another, or kind of one, early elementary to kind of upper elementary, then to that middle school. So you can just start to think about, we can even flip to the last one here, kind of showing our middle school. And you'll also notice the number of standards definitely kind of increases as we have those kiddos that are getting older and ready to take on some more complex information, maybe some more abstract ideas, but still there are standards here in all 4 domains. As you look at the red, you will notice that really didn't change, and it is the same kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then actually 3rd through 8th grade. Those red engineering, technology, and application standards are the same throughout. They're just kind of getting a little bit more complex and adding a little bit more to those as we go. So, and these might not directly correlate to exactly the number of standards. There may be a couple times when things kind of, I group things together just so you can see the really big picture and the main or the big ideas kind of as we go through the grade levels. This will then kind of connect to what they look like, right? When I first saw the new standards and I was a little bit taken aback, right? In all honesty, because we went from, our standards documents being just a few pages long to now there's basically a page for every single standard. And it can feel a little overwhelming. I was a little taken aback. But when we start to break it down, we start to realize that it's not quite as overwhelming as it maybe initially looks. At the very top, you will see your kind of the standard number and the title. And that box in gray, that might not be unique for every single standard. There could be some of those titles that carry over from one to another. So kind of a bigger idea. Then we have the performance expectation, the standard, in the white box there. So that's basically just telling us students who demonstrate understanding of this content can do XYZ. And it has kind of that very specific piece of content for students to show the demonstration of understanding. And then in red, there might be a clarifying statement, an example. So you as someone who's working with the standards can kind of understand what they mean. I always felt like sometimes in the past with the standards, you would read the standard and think about, well, that could be interpreted a few different ways. They were a little bit more vague. I think what we've tried to do now is have these standards that are a little bit more clear and even providing some of that clarification right there. And then you just have those 3 areas that we've talked about before. So in the bluish purple color here, you have your practices or the processes that could help your kids have an understanding of that particular standard or content piece. In the orange is where you'll see the content, that disciplinary core idea, and the green is where you'll see those cross-cutting concepts or those overarching themes kind of related to each. And some of the standards, this looks, a little bit longer because there's lots of different connections that can be made, or there might be a number of different practices or processes that can be used to help your kids gain an understanding of that. And for some of them, they're definitely a little shorter and a little bit more straightforward. So just kind of a quick overview of what they look like and what the different pieces are as you're starting to kind of get to those standards and look through them and take in all of the information that's there. So then just kind of bringing it all together, those 3 areas, right? So ultimately you have your science performance expectations, and then we have those 3 dimensions, the practices, or in other words, what's being done to help students, have an understanding of the content, or in other words, the process. We have our cross-cutting concepts, or those general themes that flow throughout, and then those core ideas, or that content, that information that the students are ultimately going to need to demonstrate an understanding of. So that's a lot, but hopefully it kind of just gives a pretty good overview of what's there in terms of those different pieces that are now incorporated into the standards, and then also the specific content that you might see kind of at a particular grade level. And we would love to share with you now a resource that will hopefully help you as you're thinking about some of the content you have and how you can start to share that with the youth that you're working with. So Vera is going to share a little bit more about our STEM Quick Wins.
So I really appreciate you sharing those big ideas, Angela, and taking the time to kind of unpack that and think through, when we look at these standards and we have all this information in front of us, what's really important for me as a 3rd grade teacher? How do I even start to plan my year and think about my mapping and where do I need to spend my time? And I think what I noticed there too was, if I know that, in 3rd grade, I'm going to be heavy in that life space, I want to think about where in the year I want to hit that. Is it going to be better for me to hit that in the spring? Is it better for me to hit that in the fall? When am I going to have that time to do that work? And when does it also go along with the season? For here in Indiana, spring is when a lot of is happening in life science. So it's, to me, that kind of makes sense if I could kind of set up my my year that way, kind of knowing that, and then knowing that those other areas I may not have as much time in, and that's okay, but just thinking quarterly a little bit with it, and what does my year look like? So I love the big ideas because those also apply to our STEM quick wins. We know educators and out of school time professionals, parents as well, have a lot on their plate. And they're really so passionate about the children that they are either teaching or are working with, or are in their own home. And they really want to make a difference for them and set them up with opportunity and experiences that are going to be fun, but also kind of move that education piece forward. As an educator, if I'm thinking about those big ideas and I know I have some period of time, I want to do a STEM activity that's going to be a little more cross curricular, that's going to let me for sure get those practices happening, being able to kind of think about those cross-cutting concepts, and really also that content piece. If I can kind of have all that happening in an experience, even if it's a short one, I'm doing what the standards want me to do. And our STEM quick wins are set up that way. We wanted to think about how can we give a free resource to educators, and everyone is an educator because we all have a connection to a child and we're helping them learn in some capacity, and set them up so that they can try something, see something, and do something. We wanted them to have limited resources. We wanted them to be very applicable and quick. So we have a short video, and then we have an activity sheet that's in English and Spanish, and it's based on those standards, something that a child should be learning. We bring it to life. And then also we have really spent time thinking about what can I do that doesn't need a million materials. We want you to be able to do this quickly and easily with the young people you're working with in the classroom as a take-home idea. It could be a homework experience, a family situation. It could be, like I said, out of school time, or just on a Saturday when you have your grandchildren over. Whatever makes the most sense for you, we want you to use this library. This library is definitely ready for you to kind of dive in and pick a big idea and can decide in there, what can I take a little bit forward and go moving forward with. So the one we have to share with you is the paper bag bracelet. I know when I think about those big ideas, when I think about the engineering and technology piece there that I have to be hitting, this is one that works really well with that. It also goes over into some of those ideas where we're thinking about conservation and we're thinking about the choices we make. And especially in some of those higher grades, when I'm trying to bring that in to the learning experiences for my young people. So definitely lots of opportunities to connect the plastic bag bracelet, which I'm going to show you the short video. You can see the activity sheet on the left-hand side, but enjoy.
Hi, my name is Emily, and
And today's STEM quick win is plastic bag bracelet. Today's STEM quick win was sponsored by Corteva. Thanks for your support, and let's get started. Humans can produce up to 1,000 pounds of trash per year per person. Today, we're going to learn how to reuse a plastic bag to make a rope or bracelet or anything you want. To learn more about the content behind today's STEM quick win, check out the activity sheet linked down below. To start, pause the video here and brainstorm a few ways you could reuse a plastic bag. Try to be as creative as possible. Today, we're going to reuse plastic bags by turning them into a bracelet. To start, you're going to want to cut the bag so it can lay flat on the table, and then cut thin, long strips of your bag. These strips are going to be used to make your bracelet. Next, you want to tape multiple strips together and begin to twist or braid them so they make a long rope. Once you're at the end of those strips, tape or tie the end together so the rope doesn't come apart. Have a buddy tie that rope you just made around your wrist, and boom, you have a bracelet. If you want, you can get creative by using those ropes to make other objects, like a jump rope or even a bag.
that's it for today's STEM Quick Win. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
We would love to see the plastic bag bracelets you create and anything else you make, so please share it with us online. And thanks again to Corteva for sponsoring today's STEM Quick Win.
So that idea of being able to take that big idea, something that I have to make happen and I have to bring alive for a child in my classroom or out of school time situation, and how can I do that? And the STEM Quick Wins are a great resource to help you kind of start delving in without that feeling of overwhelmingness that sometimes we get when we're trying something new. And I'm going to let Angela share a little bit about how she's gone ahead and aligned these to those big ideas.
Yeah, so with all of our STEM Quick Wins and all of our programming, we like to have those connections to the standards, those the ways that they are aligned. So when you visit our STEM Quick Wins page of the website, you'll see a little narrative at the top, and then there'll be a button that will take you to our YouTube channel with the playlist with all the activities, and then you'll see all the themes listed. And if you scroll a little bit farther than that, there's that green button that says Info for Educators. And when you click on that, it's going to take you to this spreadsheet. Right here's just a little snapshot of a portion of it where you can see all of our STEM Quick Win activities. They are organized by theme. So the plastic bag bracelet activity that we just saw there is part of our Let's Go Green theme. And then you can even see that the activity sheet is linked directly there for kind of quicker access. They're also linked when you go to those YouTube videos, and then you can kind of see the theme. So like we saw, right? Like when you have some of those content areas, like I think first grade, they have light. There's a few activities right there that connect with that. So those themes can kind of help you connect with those ideas, that content. And then you have the disciplinary core idea domain or domains that it may connect with. And then those cross-cutting concepts that are going to be reinforced by that activity. So if you look at the plastic bag bracelet, it's part of that Let's Go Green. And here we have some engineering ideas being reinforced. We're going to be thinking about energy and matter, or the structure and function of things. And so that's all kind of laid out right there for you. So hopefully that's a helpful tool that you can utilize, or that if when you're using the STEM Quick Wins, you have kind of that standard alignment right there for you to reference. And there's just also the link to get you to that document on its own. And then Veer's going to share a little bit more about a couple or some of the other resources that you may use to help you.
So when we think about these standards, we know that they're really trying to push us to think more as a scientist and an engineer, as a mathematician, a technician, kind of beyond just where we are today. And that's really one of the reasons that they have been revamped the way they are. They connect to those next generation science standards. But that idea of how do we help young people really start to think about what does it mean to be a creator, an inventor, a scientist, someone that does something to make a difference. And I think what's so exciting about what the NSTA has done here with these best books for 2022 is there are a lot of those stories in here. They take something and they try to make it a little more accessible to a young person, and they try to take inventions or big ideas or something maybe really common like glasses and help explain the back piece of it. And in doing that, it connects to all the different pieces of the standard. So I think whenever those literature connections can help reinforce, if it's modeling how to think about an idea or how someone solved a problem, or kind of also thinking from a more diverse standpoint, showing young people that if they see it, they can be it. Can you show them a young person or an adult that might look like them that solved this big problem? If we can look at that story, it's really exciting. And if we can talk about these big, amazing people and think about them when they were young, when they maybe had this idea or they were thinking about starting this problem, it's just going to be a modeling piece that's going to go along with what's happening in the classroom. So Angela and I, books are something we love very much, especially when we can see any type of cross-curricular reinforcement. We have seen so many times with young people when they have a literature connection that is founded in science and also has that personality to it and those individuals in it, their storyline. We just see the amount of learning that happens and what those young people that we're working with remember. So just are always a big proponent for finding ways to bring in literature connections any possible way. One of the books here that I was drawn to was the light bulb one, the Eureka. This is a series that by the NSTA that really is kind of trying to connect science and history. Again, any way I can do double dipping when I'm teaching makes me happy. And if I can connect those dots in the right way, then it's really exciting. What I like about it is it's something really common, a light bulb. We all are so thankful for our light bulbs and what they do, especially in the winter. And we're in the winter here in Indiana right now. They just make such a difference. But where did they come from? Who had that idea? What was that invention that started what we have today? What has the progress been from when those were invented by Edison to where we are today? So this book does a great job of kind of starting that idea, connecting to the historical piece, but then also setting up for what kind of light bulbs do we have now and what might they look like in the future, which I love those questions of kind of going forward and then how that can connect back. So that's the one I saw out of here. We know also that the NSTA will be releasing their new list for 2023 very soon. Highly recommend you take a look at it. Is there a way you could bring some of these into the learning experiences, possibly getting a grant from maybe your PTO or foundation, education foundation? Those are great ways to bring more books into the classroom. Libraries are also wonderful if you can get a connection with a good librarian near you to help you even bring in more books. But anyway, that can happen. I'm always excited to think about books and how they connect. And we are just excited to share the list and love to hear what you've used too, to kind of really bring those standards to life is really what I think about it. Because, when the standards are on the paper, it's hard to see how they're going to come to life. So we're always thinking about the activity, the content, what am I going to be setting up? And books come in so many positive ways. Also here we have some more resources for you. So, as you're starting to kind of look at this information and you want to reference back, was there a slide that was important to you that spoke to you? Do you want to see that again? Is there something we referenced that you want to go a little deeper with? We just wanted to have this for you to have accessible. And then just more about what we do. We wanted you to have that link to STEM Quick Wins. It's a free resource. We love it when it's shared with others. The videos and the activity sheets are free. We want you to use them so that you can move education forward for a young person. However that looks, that's what our goal would be. In addition, we have other educator empowerment opportunities. Would love you to join us for that. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter and keep updated. We love to share out information. We're all in this together. I think educators are known for sharing information and really thinking about what's the best for children. So would love to connect with you in some way on social, what you're up to, what are some successes you're having with the new standards? What are some of the questions you have around them? Or is there something you're still delving with and not feeling confident? Would love to have a conversation around that. Reach out. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Time is your most important commodity and you chose to spend it with us. So thank you so much. And I hope we connect again soon.